Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Acoustic Analysis. I'm Warren, and today we're going to be diving into the David Bowie classic A Space Oddity from 1969. We're going to talk about how to play it, look at who wrote it, who produced it, some of the cats who played on it, why it was important to David Bowie, and also got to look at what does it all mean, Basil. I'm going to take a stab at playing the thing front to back at the very end, too. So stick around.
It's acoustic analysis.
Okay, first up, what are the chords? Well, there's quite a few sections in this, so I'll try to show you all of them. Bear with me. Starts on, for the intro, it's an F major 7 to E minor 7. So that repeats twice, and then we go into the verse, the first verse. The ground control is a major tone, and that is it's a C, E minor 7, C, E minor 7, A minor over G. That repeats. At the end of it, may God's love be with you, ends on the D, and play a D7 and go one fret at a time every 2 bars to create the suspense. This is the part the orchestra's playing. Is our intrepid Major Tom is going up into the stratosphere. He gets into outer space, and then we go into the second verse. This is ground control to Major Tom, which is back to C, and then to E. This time it's an E major, not a minor. And then E7 to an A minor over G, F, just a regular F, and then C, F. Then we go to F major 7. Back to C, back to F. So that repeats until we go twice, and then we go into the floating in a tin can bit, which is the same as the intro. It's just F major 7. Here am I sitting in a tin can. So it's just F major 7 to E minor. And then the planet Earth is blue and there's nothing I can do bit. That's B flat. Planet Earth is blue. A minor, and then G, F major 7. And then there's a little turnaround bit. They do bar chords here. It's C, F, G, A. C, F, G, A. And then we do a lead section, which is back into our F major 7 to E, E7, A, not minor, up to C, up, one full tone to D, and then this little weird bit, whatever that is, I don't know, I play it differently every time, but that's how it goes, and then you just repeat to the end. Last verse, and then it repeats that lead bit, sort of delicate guitar lead section that goes and plays the song out to the end, basically. So that's it. Now let's get to the meat and potatoes of the whole thing. Who wrote it? Who produced it? Who played on it? David Bowie wrote it. In 1969, in February, he did the first demo, which I can't find actually. I've never even heard it, but if you know where to find a copy of it or where I can find one, let me know in the comments section, would you? So in February 69, he went into the studio in London and with his collaborator at the time, John Hutchinson. Hutchinson, I bet you had a hand they collaborated for several years at this point. I bet you that he had a hand in maybe even the writing of this, certainly the massive arranging that went on it, not the strings and everything, but just the layout of the song, because those two were thick as thieves at the time. So the two of them went into the studio, laid down the demo for Bowie. This is Bowie had only had one album. It didn't do very much anywhere worldwide at all. He was fairly unknown. He was about to lose his record deal, and in fact, after they recorded this demo, he did lose his record deal, and he was picked up by, I think it was Decca. It wasn't Decca here in North America, but in the UK, and they picked him up based on the demo from February. And then they go later in the spring into the studio in Trident Studios in London to record the actual, what is the version that we all know. They asked Sir George Martin if he would do it, and he listened to it, and I think somebody said he thought it was a little cornball. I guess kind of, with the whole space race thing going on. It was certainly topical at the time, but Sir George Martin could probably pick and choose his projects in 1969, one would think. And he said no to it. So it went on to another in-house producer named Gus Dungeon. Gus had worked with the Zombies for a song called She's Not There earlier in his career. That's probably the first one of note that he did, although he worked in the studio at Trident for years before that. He went on for fame and fortune to play or produce for Sir Elton John for many years to come. They would collaborate on and off for many decades. Actually, this is very interesting. Gus Dungeon would be one of the partners of Rocket Recording? It was a record company that they started with Bernie Taupin, Elton John, and Gus. So big history with him, but this is before he was hitting his stride in the big time. I could probably say that this song, Space Oddity, put Gus on the map as a producer. It's beautifully produced, the orchestral arrangement in it, groundbreaking stuff. It was also beautifully put into stereo. I've heard that the original was in mono, but they did a studio stereo version afterwards. Back then, think Sgt. Pepper. Have you ever noticed, if you listen to it on headphones or on a very high-end stereo, the separation from left to right was almost, in this day and age, considered to be ridiculous. I kind of love it, though. So they'd put like the bass and the drums and rhythm guitar all on the right channel, for example, completely. So if you did the balance thing on the left, there was no bass, no drums. There's like the rhythm section was on one side and the vocals and everything else were on the other side. That's how this one was recorded too when it was put into stereo. It was huge separation. I think it sounds pretty spacey. That kind of sound is very, hi-fi, which was all the rage at the time, don't you know, with the kids. So it's a fantastic sounding record. Who played on it? Bowie played acoustic guitar. It just says acoustic, but I think it was 12-string, although I'm playing a 6 today. Shh. He also played what was called the stylophone, which was the first digital keyboard. It wasn't a keyboard. It was like about this big, maybe about 8-9 inches or whatever, and you played it with a stylus, like a pen almost. And you played the individual notes in it, and it was almost like a Casio cheap type of kid's toy. Really. I had a built-in speaker, probably about that small, and it just had this really high-tech, spacey, space-age kind of sound. So Bowie actually played it himself on part of this recording, and pre-keyboards, all they had to work with was orchestra up until this point. But wait! This is not the first by any stretch of the imagination. But a big song back in the 60s to use the mellotron. That was pre-sampling sampling. It was analog sampling. For the uninitiated who don't know what the mellotron was and is. They took tape loops, like recording a cassette tape, of an orchestra, and each loop would be triggered by each individual key to get each separate note. And they were very finicky. They didn't like to be moved, so they stayed stationary in recording studios for the most part. This is not a roadworthy instrument. And it had a very melancholy, hollow, ghosty kind of sound. And it was meant to replace, I guess for economies, the entire string section of an orchestra. But here's the funny thing. Look at Nights in White Satin, the first known use of a mellotron that I can come up with, and of a couple of years before this. They also used a full orchestra within that recording. So what's the point? Why have both? Because it sounds really good and they had lots of money to do stuff with. That's why you use both. So they did the same thing in Space Oddity. They used the Mellotron, and they also put the huge full orchestra behind it. And you get the combination of the two, the haunting sound of the Mellotron through the verses, but also there's the full orchestra almost backing up the Mellotron. So who played the Mellotron? There was an in-house musician. In fact, the whole band was basically in-house studio musicians. One of them went on to fame and fortune. The keyboardist who played the Mellotron, for instance, certainly did. Rick Wakeman. Wakeman went on to be legendary keyboardist of Yes, prog rock Hall of Famers. So that's kind of a cool little side note, I thought. And recorded in 69 in Trident Studios in London. It was released in July of 1969. It went to, this is why it was important to Bowie, it went to number 5 in his home country in the UK. But in North America, over on this side of the pond, it almost did nothing. What was it? 124 in the US Billboard charts upon its release, just after Apollo 11. I'm shocked at that. I mean, think about this. First man landing on the moon, space race, all culminating in that big moment, and then this song, Space Oddity, comes out. It should have been huge for him, but it wasn't. It's very strange. It did, however, go on to hit number 5 on its re-release. The whole album was re-released in 1973, so 4 years later. And it went to number 5 in the States. It's very strange. So it had so many different lives. It was re-released again in 75, a different acoustic-y kind of stripped-down version in 79, and then, of course, a big version, and I think it was 2013, where the astronaut from Canada, what was his name? Hadfield, Chris Hadfield. He was Commander Hadfield in the space station, brought his guitar with him, and actually did a live broadcast playing this song. And David Bowie famously tweeted Hadfield just after he finished playing this, and he said, "Hello, spaceman." Can't you just hear him saying that? It's so cool. "Hello, spaceman." Yeah, that's another cool little tidbit. So this song had a life of its own, but it started very slowly, at least here in North America. It was not a hit for many years after its original release. We hadn't even heard of Bowie until 73, and then he went over here. Anyway, London England, they already knew all about him. Lucky sods. So, what does it all mean, Basil? This song has a few different meanings to it, actually. There's some influences here. Number one influence is the obvious, the space race, everything space. Cars look like they were from outer space from the late 50s all through to this time period. It was all the jet and jet age, and everything was ultra modern. It was a thing at the time, definitely, and I love sci-fi, so this has always been one of my favorite songs. And it also had a second meaning, though, a little bit deeper. They say that Bowie was making fun or taking a jab at the British space program, which obviously did not really exist. It never got off the ground, so to speak. I've heard that he was kind of taking a polite little jab at his countrymen for the lack of a space program. But also, you can't ignore the obvious one. Stanley Kubrick's 1968 film classic, the 2001 A Space Odyssey. He did a play on words and called this A Space Oddity. Cute. So that's what it all means. Three different things, and the rest of it's just basically a story unto itself. A geek time, I'm pulling out for this one. Best tool for the job for this, the 1959 Gibson J200. And without further ado, let's give it a shot. All right. love be with you. This is ground control to Major Tom. You're looking pretty good, and the papers want to know whose shirt you wear. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare. This is Major Tom to ground control. I'm stepping through the door, and I'm floating in a most peculiar way, and the stars look very different today. For here am I sitting in a tin can, far above the world. Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do. Though I've gone 100,000 miles, I'm feeling pretty still, and I think my spaceship knows which way to go. Tell my wife I love her very much. She knows. Ground control to Major Tom, your circuit's dead. There's something wrong. Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear? Am I sitting in a tin can, far above the world? Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do. Insert far out space noises. There you have it. Space Oddity 1969 David Bowie classic on acoustic analysis. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, share it, like it. If you must, subscribe. I would love it because we've got a whole bunch more of these coming up for you. So please watch again, and we'll join you next time. Thank you very much.
It's acoustic analysis.